our open floor discussion. I was thinking, that we have about an hour to discuss this slide that Kathy put on the board from a holistic perspective to the whole project, I think. So we can talk about all these, the three components, and at the same time integration under the context of these roses, thorns, and buds. And then I was thinking that we break into research, extension, and education rooms. And there, I think we can lay out a roadmap for the year in terms of actions and specifics that we want to accomplish, getting the feedback from the advisory board. And of course, everybody's free to move across all three rooms as we keep the discussion. We have a leader, so Kathy is going to lead the education, I'm leading the research, and then Eric is going to lead the extension breakout room, where we lay out more just concrete actions, I think, and a roadmap. So if we accomplish that, that'll be great. So it's beyond just brainstorming. That's probably more a session for action. And then ideally we finalize with some brief reports from each room, and then as brief brainstorming session again for integrating all these three components. So the extension, research, and education that we've been doing this morning. So that's, I think, the general idea for this. Yeah, and hopefully we should maybe able to finish before the plan that we have. So let's start with this discussion on strengths, challenges, and opportunities, and then integrate it across all three components of the project. So if you have any questions, or start typing into the chat, or so we record all these insights, ideas, comments that the group may have in an open floor. So yeah, I'll start asking a question. So what are the concerns you see on this project, or challenges? For me, one is what I've been identifying from the beginning is like integrating, and what we've been discussing this morning, trying to keep this as a dynamic and fluid program, as opposed to just compartments and single efforts.
Juan, what do you see as a method to get feedback distributed to the folks that need it, so that there can be further discussion, say either from this meeting or in the future?
I mean, feedback in terms of
oh, there's been a lot of great discussion, ideas, people to talk to about in my area, different species that could be used. But it seems like it would be really important to sort of like run that past producers and, have that kind of interaction as an ongoing thing before we make decisions. And if we're going to plant some of these plots in the spring, you know, it's a real priority to get that feedback, and make sure that we're not just perpetuating things that were in the proposal without kind of sharpening them with that. And I just wondered what the mechanism will be to get that interaction.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, that could be one effort that related to research that you know, everybody from this group can pitch in terms of selecting those or proposing some of these species. Beyond, you know, that list that we had, it was just the initial point, but and maybe, you know, I don't know if it's, what do you think in terms of creating I had issues with Box, you know, some people, when I create a document in Box, have issues for accessing the document. So maybe going the old-fashioned way through emails. You know, I have the email, and she also has an email for the full group. So shooting those emails, we can send the list of species that we have, and then starting collecting feedback from the group in terms of potential species that you think will be worth testing with these ideas, you know, that ideally having some secondary compounds, some bioactive, maybe used in traditional medicine or in ethnomedicine, ethnoveterinary as a medicinal plant, or plant that has some component that may be useful for the animal. And then maybe some information on how, I know that Rick, I think we had some interaction through emails that mentioned some species, you know, that that people tend to use, but, you know, suggesting those species, maybe the ecosites that are at least known that those species may do, or they may persist or establish, and then we can come up with a list where we can use, you know, because the plan is to have research plots and potentially some demonstration plots where we can test some of those species. So
When you say research plots as opposed to demonstration plots, what do you envision for the demonstration plots?
Well, some plots that we could see the, you know, not necessarily following the experimental design that you propose, maybe with less species and without the number of replications that we are proposing for the research. You know, it's a much more, the same way we do the demonstration plots for the foodscapes, which will be at a much smaller scale. Maybe we can have those close to these grazing, for instance, grazing schools, maybe, you know, some at this open, when there's some land in some school, you know, with any location that you think might be worth. We won't, of course, get a really long or big list of locations, but at least have some that we can show, you know, when we do these grazing schools or the any education component of the project. So without having, that's what my vision is, that without having to worry about having the right number of replications and number of species, maybe even an unreplicated plot, you know, that's.
It might be something that we could get, maybe just check through extension to see if there are county agents who would be interested in demonstrations like that. it would be nice to have somebody on site to kind of shepherd it and give us information on how well things are doing, because you'd hate to put something out and then have it just be a mess and not even know about it.
Yeah, we need to get some people from the group, that willing to help with that for sure.
Well, not necessarily folks that are already involved in the proposal.
Yeah, or additional people, that you think that may be interested in.
And if we're going to have an email discussion, maybe we can check with folks who are part of the proposal or are engaged already, and just find out who would be interested, and maybe have a discussion that isn't limited to one or two people, like going back and forth, because it would be great to have somebody else commenting as you're saying, well, what about this species? And they could say, well, we've tried that, or I think some of the plant materials that we used may have huge amounts of value, but maybe they're so agronomically unworthy that they aren't practical. You've been talking about functional plants, which I think is a great word. We want things that will function reasonably well in a variety of circumstances, I think, at least as kind of a base group of plants.
Jennifer, somebody suggested there's some parallels here, because of what we're doing in education. We want to have practical applications in the classroom. So we're working closely with classroom teachers on a bi-weekly basis. So what you're talking about, I think, is you want what you're doing with the plants to have practical applications, and that they will implement at the producer level, right?
Yep, that's right.
So, the model we're using that seems to be working well is we meet 1 week as an education team, and we plan for our lessons. We come up with questions that I take to Juan and Eric, but also questions and ideas for the teachers. And then we meet with the teachers on the alternate week. So, we have regular meetings and getting their input. So that's a model to consider with the producers.
I think sometimes, if you have an interesting topic, there's a little flurry of input, and then it kind of goes away. So I wouldn't want to impose sort of regular, meetings that everybody sort of gets tired of. I think it would just be nice to have a group that's interested, and they can drop in and drop out if they wish, but so that we don't miss valuable experience and input as we're building this. I think we have a great base line group of plant materials, but we're going to be learning a lot, and it would be nice to be able to communicate that with folks that are directly interested in their value for these resource islands, and then get input on what else we can be trying. I see Rita has asked about the location of the demonstration plots, and I think that the idea that Juan was suggesting was that they be accessible to maybe folks who are engaged in ranching more than students, but certainly not limited to that.
So I guess my question, Jennifer, is how do you envision these foodscapes at the schools? Do you envision them being like the research plots or like the producer plots or something different? Because I heard you say that some things, survive, are more survivable or faster to get results. And so I'm just wondering kind of if you had any thoughts on that.
I guess my in my imagination, it would make sense to select things that we could definitely say important positive things about. So maybe a subset of the whole list of plant materials that have really well-defined purposes and that would attract different kinds of pollinators. I saw a comment in the chat about an urban environment is going to have different pollinators than rangeland environment, which of course I wouldn't have thought of it, but of course that makes sense. And so if I were teaching this, I would want something that I could rely on to be predictably, helpful in one area or another. Not to say that it's not valuable to just explore the unknown, but lesson plans and so on call for some pretty specific responses. And you learn from the students and see what they react to. And so I think we want to make sure that the gardens are enticing and that kind of make the points that the larger project is trying to make, but maybe on a smaller scale in terms of the number of plant materials.
So maybe we can all work together with Caitlin to come up with something, or a variety, or maybe 3 choices of things that might work. And then the schools can pick which one they might like to try, possibly, is an idea. Yeah. Because I know people like to have choices, and also some people are very connected to certain kinds of plants for some, like people love sunflowers, for example,
Yeah. Well, and I think that if we have we I think are required to have a place where our data are uploaded, that we can take photographs, we can provide data on establishment, and so then you can think about things to try from the entire list. That to me would make sense, that if you have the data, then you can start asking questions and making choices based on that.
Oh, so that's an idea. So you would offer a list, you're saying, that would have information, and then people could pick a subset of that list.
I would want that kind of information if I were trying to sort through these things, and then also be able to just have a chat about it at an appropriate time if necessary, and especially if we can include pollinator information that we collect in the first year.
Okay, I think that's a great idea.
I also think, though, that we should make sure that there's some things that are the same in all of the school gardens, especially in the foodscape part, so that we can definitely compare among the different schools. And I think that like for the citizen science thing, then we would have data that was consistent across all of them.
Yeah, I can imagine the education team coming up with a list that they think would be appropriate.
Yeah, I agree with Caitlin. We need to have some consistency. That's true. We certainly have done that here in North Carolina. So, yeah.
Well, I would also argue we want some consistency from the field to those gardens. Because to me, it'd maximize the students' ability to make comparisons if we have the same forbs both in the field and in the gardens. And most of the schools that these are going into or that have been proposed to have the gardens should be compatible with the areas where we're putting the demonstration plots and the experimental plots. So I think that would be an important linkage, is the same plant material across research plots, demonstration plots, and then the education gardens. I I think we would miss an opportunity if we did, because then it doesn't connect all of those things together.
Yeah, I agree with that. You know,
Yeah.
we could include wildflowers if we're concerned about them blooming early and late in other parts of the garden. There are other, you know, they can be
Yeah.
in and among other things, so.
And Rita, we could also give them more choices in that area then. So we could say you have to have these things in your foodscape. Like even if it's just 5 plants that are consistent across all these different things. And then the other things are, you know, we can give them a big list and they can see what they like the best.
Oh, sure, they can plant them in their plots, they can plant them in, they can plant them everywhere if they want to.
Yeah, it looks to me that a great opportunity to make this integration among components of the project will be this trying to build this list of species. And I think it's that starting from ground zero, right? That's where we kick off this project, right? So looking at what is in these islands. So that I think if we create this group, and I see great comments here, you know, from Chris and Taylor, Rick, there are several great comments that are all related to this idea of species. So if we circulate this, I have to check, you know, maybe through emails or maybe in our website, if we can set up a link where for members, you know, we don't want to make it public because it can be a big mess, but within the advisory board and people involved in the project, if we can get like link where we have like a chat, you know, having something like this chat here now, that you know, after lunch or whenever you are thinking about or you hear about any comment related to the species, you just type that into this chat. And so I'll check if there's a feature that we can have in our website where we can use as like the brainstorming link for species identity, I guess, anything that relates to that. And that is essentially, you know, to me, that makes a lot of sense to create this continuity between the range, the research, the extension and education on this, particularly for these gardens in terms of the species, you know, that smart foodscapes, that there should be right there a connection among the species we use in research and the ones that you are also test or using for education and extension purposes.
I really like the idea of something that would be on the website and that would just stay there, and that anybody involved in the proposal could jump on and make a comment. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, so that's, yes, Angie, yeah, if you can, yeah, Angie mentioned that to the group in terms of the page on the website. Yeah, so that's, maybe that will work even better than the, Angie's going to check, you know, that maybe that will work better than like these emails going back and forth. Because yeah, we're already getting a pile of emails coming all over so yeah, if you have just a link where like a chat like this, and I know, you know, you've been discussing this already with Randall. I don't know if he's here today, but Randall and well, Eric. So that's okay. So Slack. So Jessica is suggesting this. Okay, that's great. So you think that we can put that into our website then, or Jessica, or?
Well, I was just going to chime in. I wasn't clear if we were talking about something that would be accessible to the public or it's just something for internal communication, but I have seen on a couple of these, big interdisciplinary research projects that I'm working on that using Slack can be good if we can kind of encourage people to communicate through Slack rather than through email, because you can send documents in there, have conversations. So if people are pretty consistent about using it, then it can work quite well.
And that's, so you think that's a link within that we can put in the website, or this is just website where you just create your own group?
I think it's an application that would be available more like on a mobile phone. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's definitely an app. I don't think it's something you'd put in the website. And like what I do is I save it to my desktop, so I get notifications when people,
okay,
when there's a conversation going on in a thread that I'm following. So like, for example, I would definitely, there'd be certain threads that are more of interest to me that I would follow. I would say that if we do go this route, that it might be a good idea for us to have some sort of quick training on the best practices for using it, so that everybody kind of knows what we're doing on there and uses it in a similar way.
yeah, I know if everybody knows, I use WhatsApp a lot, and then we have within the WhatsApp app, there's we can create groups, within that application, and maybe this is the same. It's like you have it in your phone, and then if you become part of a group, then that's something that can communicate within that application. And that's, yeah, and also you can upload, so this may be the same, you can upload the documents, chat, anything, and that's and then it's just for the group, it's for that, so we can put everybody in that that application uses the phone numbers, and then you just get that info, anything, thoughts, no species, and it's been really useful for a group we have in terms of people are looking for jobs and posting requests for positions, and they post everything there. So that's
The only question I would have is, would there be sort of a permanent record of it for the sake of reporting and that kind of thing? And would somebody just joining have access to everything that had come before, which might be useful for a grant project like this?
Yeah, so anybody has, Trello looks like, and she has another comment on another app. So we might have to decide which one.
I will second Jessica's point about Slack. Again, I've used it on another big grant like this that had multiple institutions. We had it broken down: research component, extension component, social science component. There's chats within each of those. You can share files. Everything is permanent, Jennifer. So even if you joined 2 years down the road, you could go back and read every chat. I'll see all the communication back and forth. Files are permanently saved there. It's pretty self-contained.
That looks like, so if other big projects are using that may be the way to go, then that's Slack.
Yeah, and it is an application. I've got it on my phone. I also have it on my desktop, like Jessica suggested. So I get notifications. I also get email notifications when somebody posts. So I think there's some advantages to it. It worked, you can run Google Docs through it, or post Google Docs. That's the way we do some of our other stuff. Is even we're talking about the species list, that would easily run through there with the Google Doc. You could just click on the doc and it would take you to the doc, and you could make your additions. So I would say,
no, that's a great suggestion, Jessica. So for Angie to, and then we can send that information to the group, and then we can have everybody. That'll be really way more efficient than the old-fashioned emails or something in the website. That's something that
maybe I can put Angie in touch with this project
Sure.
manager for this other project, because she just went through the process of setting things up and maybe pick their brain a little bit about what's working well and what's not working well. And then maybe once Angie learns a bit more about it, she can, and maybe, I think this other program manager might know where some good resources are for training people working on it. And then share it with us. Maybe we can have another quick meeting that people can get introduced to it.
No, so you should, and it's so you register with your phone number, or you use your email or phone number?
Both. I think
Both.
it's email.
Oh, okay. So yeah, that should be fairly straightforward. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Angie,
yeah,
I'll
so
put you in touch with this other project manager that I think can help you with getting us up and running on it.
that's great. That's so we can have our Smart Foodscapes Slack group, and then yeah, so and then you can partition that into research, extension, education, or
Yeah, and then even more, you know, we can have a grad students area, an undergrad students area, just all sorts of different places that people can segment into based on different levels of interest.
That's perfect. Yeah, let's go, because I think to me that's the foundational plan that will really be nicely integrating all this research, extension, education. Will be this species, start to visit about this, you know, about potential lists of species, and
I wouldn't be too quick to silo it into research, extension, and education, though. I think what we really need is the cross-talk, the cross-communication, and you know, synergies that would come from not just talking to other people involved, say, in research.
yeah, as a starting point, we may have just, you know, one site, and then we'll see how that evolves.
Yeah, but maybe something around the plant materials.
And then we
or-
may start, you know, adding, as you say, like students, so that can evolve, you know, with time. But at the beginning, we can start really simple with just a link, and yeah, that'll be perfect.
Jennifer, just to answer your question, there's a ton of flexibility. So you could start those communications to the general group, meaning the whole group, or within each individual discipline. You know, there's nothing that would preclude you as a researcher, for example, reading anything in the education chat or in the extension chat. So it's pretty fluid. It's not terribly siloed. Does that help? I don't know if that
Oh, yeah.
really answered your question.
Well, I was hoping that we could use it as a tool to encourage more integration. So I was just suggesting that starting it out, maybe divided into these three areas, isn't necessarily where I was thinking we should go with it. I'd just like to be in touch with anybody involved in, you know, the plant materials side, or and then be able to jump over into folks that are maybe doing something in education that I'm interested in as well. But just not get too predictive about where we need to be working.
No, that'd be a really great way to keep everybody in the loop and updated with another experience I have with these groups is also trying to minimize the comments, and because in many cases can be, especially big groups, can be overwhelming, you know, getting lots of messages on a daily basis. So we can but yeah, I think we can try at the beginning and see how we can manage this, but this can be an amazing tool, I think, for integration and setting up the basis for these first steps on species identity. I think that that'll be one component that that can, you know, move across all the research, extension, and education. Yeah, actually, that was one of my questions. You know, for these gardens, which species you are planning on seeding on those? And I see in several you already have the beds and everything, so it's something that we need to address probably as soon as possible in terms of species. And I remember we talked about this, you know, saving some of the seed that we use for these gardens. But yeah, now it seems that we are reaching the point where we need to make decisions on which species, because those gardens are going to be seeded this spring, right? Or at least one of the gardens, or
Juan, are you talking about the school gardens or are you
school
talking about
gardens.
something else? Okay.
Yeah, the school gardens.
Yeah, yes, for the elementary schools. Mhm.
So
They'll
they're coming
start in
this
spring.
spring, yeah. So yeah, so this is something that requires almost immediate attention in terms of the. Yeah, and for sure we have that list that we already seeded, right, Jennifer? So that's one starting point.
Yeah, but we won't have any data on the plant
But we don't have any
materials
dates, no.
until, you know, for a year.
But you have the flowering, right? So the flowering periods and
I'd have to pull up the proposal to recall exactly what we listed for everything.
yeah, so that may be one of the, since we don't have any other information, well, and then we have information on the chemistry of, or the bioactives that at least some of those species we think they contain, you know, for you know, like antioxidants or antibiotic, antiparasitic, all those. We have some of that information that, you know, that may be another topic to talk about, you know, for your education purposes, is looking at all these, talking about ethnomedicine, ethnoveterinary science, and the role of that those bioactives have played in through history in terms of enhancing animal and human health.
Yeah, and one I shared a link yesterday to an article that Caitlin had shared on indigenous gardening and ways to address some of the climate change issues also. So yeah, we're linking to indigenous gardening practices and native
Great.
plants. Yes.
That's great. You know, that's something that that for sure is really significant. You know, there's a lot of interest on that, on how that, and that integration between, you know, ethnomedicine and ethnoveterinary science. So, and how they are connected, you know, that many cultures have actually their own gardens for their animals and for themselves. They share essentially the same plants for their health and their animal health.
Yeah.
Mhm. That's certainly true here in North Carolina. The Lumbee have their own, they have their own gardens exactly for that. They own herbal medicines, and yeah.
That's perfect. You know, that's
I bought the things from them, and yeah, they work pretty well actually.
that's amazing. And you see that, you know, so many cultures, you know, if you go to Africa, they have the same, you know, India has the same principle, you know, that using those gardens for the animals and themselves. So it's something that, you know, transcends. And the bottom line of that is that these bioactives are actually affecting or enhancing the welfare and homeostasis of the individual, right? So that principle then is shared across all cultures, essentially, because it's a principle that governs life. The approaching, those chemicals, allowing the individual to approach a state of well-being. And we can say the same for soils, for plants, not just the animals.
We were having a little sidebar through chat. USU Extension has some really excellent resources for the schools in terms of pollinators and native plants. So I used a lot of these resources in planning my own landscaping recently, but we have some good resources to share with them from Extension. And Eric, any others that you know about, send them our way.
Well, and I've mentioned to you before, we have county agents specifically in Carbon and Emery County, which would be next to the school there in Price, that have expertise in entomology and landscape architecture. So there's some real resources there to help with any of that, as well as, county agents are kind of a jack of all trades. So they do a little bit of everything, but they're a good resource.
Yeah, we have, I have notes on it, but we have an extension agent in Utah who's looking about reintroducing native pears, right?
Is that Reagan Wadalusi down in San Juan County?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, she's also done a bunch of work with peaches and a bunch of other stuff. She's Navajo, so she's a great resource down there in San Juan County as well. She's really into horticulture. In fact, she was one of Brent Black's grad students. So she's got a lot of experience there.
Yeah, I've got notes on that, and we need to make those connections.
Okay, yeah, it's a great resource here on that link that I think is probably sent on that guide, Jennifer, in terms of species and all these characteristics of the species, bloom time and so on. Yeah,
I'm wondering if through the communication platform, Slack, I do believe, some kind of resources list could be developed by region. I've heard a lot of people mention a lot of different people's names that have expertise in all these different things. Be nice if there was some kind of list, maybe.
Oh, you mean names of potential
collaborators in different regions that have different types of expertise.
Yeah, and actually we got some right during this meeting. I know that Rick sent some names, and also, well, Karen Mock gave you some names to Jennifer. So potential, people at least we can visit and see that, pick the reins in terms of potential species that we may recommend. No, so yeah, Angie, that'll be the first task. Then one of the actions I think from this meeting is trying to get that application, and then have the whole group in this in the application, and then starting brainstorming from there.
Yeah, that website that Brody put up is you can put in the common name or the species name and get to any of the plant materials on our list, and then that's where you can link to the plant guides for each one of the species. So it's a real font of information. So that's a great link to use.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, going to another topic as beyond the species is, I think Chris brought this topic early on in terms of looking at persistence. So that was one of the concerns and red flags, I think, that we got from yesterday on this island. So once they're established and ready to go, that's a concern that that I don't have very many solutions. Just managing grazing could be one answer. But I don't know if anybody has more ideas in terms of how, once we have this, even say that really resilient and tolerant species, how we create like a context that allows or tries to maximize persistence. With all the challenges, that going even not just for domestic by wild herbivores. So that's for sure. I see that as a big challenge on this, how that
Well, alfalfa is a classic because it really needs that 6 weeks between, in this environment anyway, the beginning of September and mid-October to rest and to restore carbohydrates to the taproot. And yet that may be kind of a prime time when it would be desirable to have it available for grazing. So there's if you graze it at that point, then it undermines the persistence. It's something that alfalfa producers probably are aware of, but just more generally, it seems to apply to a lot of deep-rooted, tap-rooted legumes. So that may be kind of an Achilles heel of this as well.
Yeah, maybe in some sites, I work in a ranch in Colorado where mostly, of course, aspen has the same issue, right? So herbivory on aspen by wild herbivores is an issue. But, ranches, they have a really high density of elk. It was clear in that landscape that the forbs, that abundance of those forbs were way below what we had in another ranch from the same owner, that the density of elk was much lower. That's so there may be sites, that, of course, this particular owner, he's a hunter, so he really tried to have elk at his ranch, and then he fenced all the aspen, so he had all his aspen stands were fenced, so you can imagine the investment. But it was clear, we did an assessment on the landscape, and the forb component was way below in that landscape relative to another ranch he had, where the number of elk were way below that density, that was amazing. He had, I don't know how many animals he had in that, hundreds of elk roaming around. So it's so there may be, sites that, given the density of wild herbivores, that this may be this simply may not work, or unless something else I mentioned, we talked with Matt that these plots are fenced, that's and this ranch, well, there's a rancher, but he did that for aspen, right? All his aspen in the ranch was fenced with chain link, or these or logs. He used logs as fence. So that's something that maybe at large scales, maybe something to think about as well,
Well, and I think Steve mentioned during, maybe it was an early discussion about the value, the economic value of the big game. So we may want to sacrifice, some of our forbs so that ranchers have a second income stream. So there's that.
Yeah, that's if aware of anybody like Rick or Eric in terms of knowing how that, similar to what happens with aspen, this threshold of wild herbivores relative to forb densities in the landscapes, or
I'm not sure what you're asking, Juan. Are you asking like a stalking rate question? How many critters until you start losing forbs, or?
yeah, some thresholds. Rick, you turn on your camera. Any idea at Deseret or any other in Colorado?
Well, even up on Deseret Livestock, the area where we had high densities of elk, like 80 elk to the section during the summertime, where the females are raising young. The forbs are pretty much gone in there.
Yeah.
Except for things that they didn't particularly want to eat. But what's funny about the plots, when I think, there were all kinds of plots put in at Deseret, and the very first plantings that I'm aware of there were put in like 1979 or 80 before I ever got there. And what they were they had put in about 20 unsuccessful oil wells on the ranch. And so all those wells had to be reclaimed. So you had these little green postage stamps out there. And Greg Simon was the boss at the time, and he was using those reclamations to try out some of these introduced species. So, alfalfa and sainfoin being two of them, small Burnett. And what's funny is that even though they were little green postage stamps, I'll bet you if we went out there today, those were still have alfalfa on them. And one in particular that I could think of was up on the mountain, so that it was grazed basically summer long by elk and mule deer and cattle or sheep when they were up there. And it was amazing how well they persisted. On the flip side, there were seedings that we put in where we saw good establishment the first year, and then maybe, and I recall one planting that was just covered with sainfoin. It was grazed early in the year after it was planted, and the sainfoin was gone. It just totally disappeared. It can be, you can have different results basically on the same soil types from one year to the other that you can't always explain.
Yeah, but, really good point.
But high densities of elk season long certainly were tough on forbs. But I think a lot of the stuff that you're talking about working in, if we're looking at low elevation, that priority of low elevation, monotonous stands of crested wheatgrass or, other or annual grasses. I don't think elk is going to be that big of a deal in most of those areas during the growing season. It'll probably be more livestock and perhaps deer or pronghorn.
No, that's a great point you bring. That I'm involved on a pronghorn diet selection study, and producers see those pronghorn on alfalfa fields, and they were saying, well, these critters are eating all this alfalfa, and then when we look at the select, so we look at the feces, right? So the barcoding, that we're looking at the species that are present in the feces. Alfalfa was a really minor, so less than 2%. So that the diet of those antelope were mostly forbs and sandfoin, that they took. So one of the things that we are, the hypothesis in that study is like, well, probably that alfalfa is too hot, too rich in protein and in, so that the animals actually, even when you see the critters standing on those alfalfa fields and producers think, well, they are hammering this alfalfa, in reality, they are using that for other reasons, maybe cover, like thermal cover or whatever, but they are not actually eating it. Whereas sandfoin, because it is the protein is not that hot for the animal because of the tannins, and that's highly preferred. So I think it really fits what you mentioned on dot and desert, right? So some plots with alfalfa may not even be persisting through time due to probably the chemistry of that alfalfa, whereas some forbs and legumes like sandfoin, they may be inhaled by those critters because of the chemistry. So that's that's something that is just new, that nobody knew that, those critters sitting on alfalfa fields will just not be eating it. It's just, so I think with these forbs, I think that may be the opportunity of all these functional species is that we may promote some type of intake control where they may not completely inhale the whole island because of the chemistry of the actual force. So that is going to be a player, I think. So the type of species in terms of the complexity of establishment, persistence, and that relative to the species itself is going to depend also on how wildlife and livestock treat those species. We want them to eat them at some extent, maybe like alfalfa, maybe. So maybe alfalfa was a really good example for having plots that are not necessarily wiped out by grazing because of the chemistry of alfalfa that provides some, to me, it's ammonia, provides a really hot component that the animals tend to stay away or really eat less. And I think that's so pretty much like you do when you supplement animals in the field and you give them some salt or some component that regulates the intake, right? That they don't overdo it. They don't just, so yeah, I think there's a lot of things to, and then, we learn more. I think the plan of putting strips, I think that, I really like the idea, the thing that Caitlin mentioned in terms of looking at the selection of the insects. We'll be also looking at, the selection of the cows as well in terms of which strip they actually prefer on that island.
Well, we've had some really interesting discussions and lots of good input. And
We're
it's
getting
about,
close to, yeah.
do you want to sum things up before we take a break before the breakout sessions?
Yeah, so we have about 15 minutes. Yeah, so from 2 to 2:15, so give 15 minutes for the, unless you want to jump right in on the breakout rooms. But we gave us about 15 minutes of break for, you know, moving into the next link. Yeah, let's have the 15 minutes.
And
So
do you have
to-
directions, Seth?
Yeah, so I'm gonna stop the recording real quick.
Yeah, it's amazing. We are on time. Yeah, it's